Which? Teal Cipher, can you hear me now? I'm gonna wait a minute before I start reading again to make sure that the audio is actually coming through. Just chilling out to wait and see if people who are watching on Twitch right now can hear me. But I'm going to be reading The Informatics of Domination, which is Section 3 of Donna Haraway's A Cyborg Manifesto. The previous two sections are available on my Twitch on the via VOD. I don't know if that's generally pronounced or spelled out. In any case, The Informatics of Domination. In this attempt at an epistemological and political position, I would like to sketch a picture of possible unity, a picture indebted to socialist and feminist principles of design. The frame for my sketch is set by the extent and importance of rearrangements in worldwide social relations tied to science and technology. I argue for a politics rooted in claims about fundamental changes in the nature of class, race, and gender, in an emerging system of world order analogous in its novelty and scope to that created by industrial capitalism. This is interesting. I argue for a politics rooted in claims about fundamental changes in the nature of class, race, and gender, in an emerging system of world order analogous in its novelty and scope to that created by industrial capitalism. So this is another example of her spelling out what she's trying to do with this project, with this essay, and what she's saying she's trying to do is to completely replace, or like build a narrative that can completely replace the understanding of class, race, and gender that capitalism globalized. We are living through a movement from an organic industrial society to a polymorphous information system, from all work to all play, a deadly game. Simultaneously material and ideological, the dichotomies may be expressed in the following chart of transitions from the comfortable old hierarchical dominations to the scary new networks I have called the informatics of domination. This chart was published in 1985 in the Cyborg Manifesto. My previous efforts to understand biology as a cybernetic command and control discourse and organisms of natural objects of knowledge were Haraway 79, 83, and 84. Later version. Alright, so it looks like the chart got reproduced on the next page instead of inline, but folks who are watching on Twitch can see this chart on screen, but reading just some examples of the chart is two columns. One says organics of domination, and the other says informatics of domination. So in organics, there is representation. On the informatics side is simulation. On the organics, there's the bourgeois novel and realism. On the informatics, there's science fiction and postmodernism. Organism, biotic component, depth/integrity, surface/boundary, heat/noise, biology is clinical practice, biology is inscription, physiology, communications engineering, small group, subsystem, perfection, optimization, eugenics, population control, and so on. This list suggests several interesting things. First, the objects on the right-hand side cannot be coded as natural, a realization that subverts naturalistic coding for the left-hand side as well. We cannot go back ideologically or materially. It is not just that God is dead, so is the goddess, or both are revivified in worlds charged with microelectric and biotechnological politics. In relation to objects like biotic components, one must not think in terms of essential properties, but in terms of design, boundary constraints, rates of flows, systems logics, costs of lowering constraints. Sexual reproduction is one kind of reproductive strategy among many, with costs and benefits as a function of the system environment. Hi, Hedgehog Girl. I'm reading from a Cyborg Manifesto. Ideologies of sexual reproduction can no longer reasonably call on notions of sex and sex role as organic aspects in natural objects like organisms and families. Such reasoning will be unmasked as irrational, and ironically corporate executives reading Playboy and anti-porn radical feminists will make strange bedfellows in jointly unmasking the irrationalism. Likewise, for race, ideologies about human diversity have to be formed in terms of frequencies of parameters like blood groups or intelligence scores. It is irrational to invoke concepts like primitive and civilized. For liberals and radicals, the search for integrated social systems gives way to a new practice called experimental ethnography, in which an organic object dissipates in attention to the play of writing. At the level of ideology, we see translations of racism and colonialism into languages of development and underdevelopment, rates and constraints of modernization. Any objects or persons can reasonably be thought of in terms of disassembly and reassembly. No natural architectures constrain system design. So what she's arguing here, I think is really important. She's arguing that liberal and radical politics both fail to deal with racism because they just come up with different ways of re-encoding racism into their own language and their own systems of comprehension. The financial districts in all the world's cities, as well as the export processing and free trade zones, proclaim this elementary fact of late capitalism. The entire universe of objects that can be known scientifically must be formulated as problems in communications engineering for the managers, or theories of the text for those who would resist. Both are cyborg semiologies. And that is something I'm going to need to reference in conversations with Toka soon. One should expect control strategies to concentrate on boundary conditions and interfaces, on rates of flow across boundaries, and not on the integrity of natural objects. Integrity or sincerity of the Western self gives way to decision procedures and expert systems. For example, control strategies applied to women's capacities to give birth to new human beings will be developed in the languages of population control and maximization of goal achievement for individual decision makers. Control strategies will be formulated in terms of rates, costs of constraints, and degrees of freedom. Human beings, like any other component or subsystem, must be localized in a system architecture whose basic modes of operation are probabilistic, statistical. No objects, spaces, or bodies are sacred in themselves. Any component can be interfaced with any other if the proper standard, the proper code, can be constructed for processing signals in a common language. I don't know how well I can make this analogy right now, but that just screams social media to me. That human beings, like any other component or system, must be localized in a system architecture whose basic modes of operation are probabilistic, statistical. Excuse me. I'm honestly not prepared to stream tonight. But I don't want to break the habit. And making an exception on the third day of this new schedule would be a bad idea. Exchange in this world transcends the universal translation affected by capitalist markets that Marx analyzed so well. The privileged pathology affecting all kinds of components in this universe is stress. Communications breakdown, Hogness 1983. The cyborg is not subject to Foucault's biopolitics. The cyborg simulates politics, a much more potent field of operations. This is another example I think we talked about on Friday. Haraway talking about Foucault and talking about other postmodern philosophers essentially as a way of saying, yes, I know Foucault said something that vaguely sounds like this. I am aware of that and I am doing something different with it. which is something that a lot of philosophers, particularly women in philosophy and feminist philosophers, have to do to be taken seriously. They have to prove that they do understand the thing that they are arguing against. This kind of analysis of scientific and cultural objects of knowledge, which have appeared historically since the Second World War, prepares us to notice some important inadequacies in feminist analysis, which has proceeded as if the organic, hierarchical dualisms ordering discourse in the West, since Aristotle still ruled. Sorry, I need to reread that sentence. My brain just didn't parse it. Chris, that's the second time you come into my chat and said that. I don't know what it means. If that's like a greeting in a language that I don't speak, I'm sorry that I'm missing it. This kind of analysis of scientific and cultural objects of knowledge, which have appeared historically since the Second World War, this kind of analysis prepares us to notice some important inadequacies in feminist analysis, which has produced as if the organic hierarchical dualisms ordering the discourse of the West, since Aristotle still ruled. Alright, so that's saying hierarchical dualisms still ruled. They have been cannibalized, or as Zoe Sophia Sophoulis might put it, have been techno-digested. The dichotomies between mind and body, animal and human, organism and machine, public and private, nature and culture, men and women, primitive and civilized, are all in question ideologically. Vine, specifically, I've used that phrase for years, so I forget people don't remember that Vine. Yeah, sorry, I know the most famous Vines, but not enough of Vine. Jedi DJ Ackloens, don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm glad that this is going to be good for your paper. Excuse me, I need to blow my nose. Sorry, I just really didn't want to do that on camera. So let's see, I just read the dichotomies between mind and body, animal and human, organism and machine, and public and private, nature and nurture, men and women, primitive and civilized, are all in question ideologically. The actual situation of women is their integration/exploitation into a world system of production/reproduction and communication called the informatics of domination. And this is getting back to the sort of thesis of this work. It is specifically a feminist proposal. The home, workplace, market, public arena, the body itself, all can be dispersed and interfaced in nearly infinite polymorphous ways, with large consequences for women and others, consequences that themselves are very different for different people, and which make potent oppositional international movements difficult to imagine and essential for survival. Where did that line start? One important route for reconstructing socialist feminist politics is through theory and practice addressed to the social relations of science and technology, including crucially the systems of myth and meanings structuring our imaginations. The cyborg is a kind of disassembled and reassembled postmodern collective and personal self. This is the self feminists must code. Communications technologies and biotechnology are Communications technologies and biotechnologies are the crucial tools for recrafting our bodies. Scientific discourses can be partially understood as formalizations, i.e., as frozen moments of the fluid social interactions constituting them, but they should also be viewed as instruments for enforcing meanings. The boundary is permeable between tool and myth, instrument and concept, historical systems of social relations, and historical anatomies of possible bodies, including objects of knowledge. Indeed, myth and tool mutually constitute each other. That is just such a badass line. This section, I'm doing a lot of highlighting that's just like, fuck yes, I love that you said that, where it's not exactly, it's not me highlighting the core points. Furthermore, communication sciences and modern biologies are constructed by a common move, the translation of the world into a problem of coding, a search for a common language in which all resistance to instrumental control disappears and all heterogeny can be submitted to disassembly, reassembly, investment, and exchange. In communication sciences, the translation of the world into a problem of coding can be illustrated by looking at cybernetic feedback-controlled systems theories applied to telephone technology, computer design, weapons deployment, or database construction and maintenance. In each case, solution to the key questions rests on a theory of language and control. The key operation is determining the rates, directions, and probabilities of flow of a quantity called information. The world is subdivided by boundaries differentially permeable to information. Information is just that kind of quantifiable element, unit, basis of unity, which allows universal translation and so unhindered instrumental power, called effective communication. Oh, I love that line. The biggest threat to such power is interruption of communication. Any system breakdown is a function of stress. The fundamentals of this technology can be condensed into the metaphor C3.1, Command, Control, Communication, Intelligence. That's C3I, Command, Control, Communication, Intelligence, the military's symbol for its operations theory. Oh, hey, look, there's somebody in chat I need to block. How do I do that on Discord? Or on... There was somebody in the Twitch chat trying to advertise some bullshit, so they are blocked now. In modern biology, the translation of the world into a problem in coding can be illustrated by molecular genetics, ecology, sociobiological evolutionary theory, and immunology. The organism has been translated into problems of genetic coding, and read out. Biotechnology, a writing technology, informs research broadly. In a sense, organisms have ceased to exist as objects of knowledge, giving way to biotic components, i.e., special kinds of information processing devices. The analogous moves in ecology could be examined by probing the history and utility of the concept of the ecosystem. Immunobiology and associated medical practices are rich exemplars of the privilege of coding and recognition systems as objects of knowledge. Sorry. Immunobiology and associated medical practices are rich exemplars of the privilege of coding and recognition systems as objects of knowledge, as constructions of bodily reality for us. Biology here is a kind of cryptography. Research is necessarily a kind of intelligence activity. Ironies abound. A stressed system goes awry. Its communication processes break down. It fails to recognize the difference between self and other. Human babies with baboon hearts evoke national ethical perplexity, for animal rights activists are at least as much for the guardians of human purity. The U.S. gay men and intravenous drug users are the privileged victims of an awful immune system disease that Marx inscribes on the body, confusion of boundaries and moral pollution. But these excursions into communication sciences and biology have been at a rarefied level. There is a mundane, largely economic reality to support my claim that these sciences and technologies indicate fundamental transformations in the structure of the world for us. It occurs to me I should have highlighted the thing about AIDS. That actually is a citation to somebody else, so highlighting in pink. Communications technologies depend on electronics. Modern states, multinational corporations, military power, welfare state apparatuses, satellite systems, political processes, fabrication of our imaginations, labor control systems, medical constructions of our bodies, commercial pornography, the international division of labor, and religious evangelism depend intimately upon electronics. Microelectronics is the technological basis of simulacra, that is, of copies without originals. Microelectronics mediates the translations of labor into robotics and word processing, sex into genetic engineering and reproductive technologies, and mind into artificial intelligence and decision procedures. The new biotechnologies concern more than human reproduction. Biology, as a powerful engineering science for redesigning materials and processes, has revolutionary implications for industry, perhaps most obvious today in areas of fermentation, agriculture, and energy. Communication sciences and biology are constructions of natural, technical objects of knowledge, in which the difference between machine and organism is thoroughly blurred. Mind, body, and tool are on very intimate terms. The multinational material organization of the production and reproduction of daily life and the symbolic organization of the production and reproduction of culture and imagination seem equally implicated. The boundary-maintaining images of base and superstructure, public and private, or material and ideal never seemed more feasible. I have used Rachel Grossman's 1980 image of women in the integrated circuit to name the situation of women in the world so intimately restructured through the social relations of science and technology. I use the odd circumlocution, the social relations of science and technology, to indicate we are not dealing with technological determinism, but with a historical system depending upon structured relations among people. Alright, so what she's doing here is talking about a confusing phrase she used and explaining why she chose to write that in such a confusing and arcane way. But the phrase should also indicate that science and technology provide fresh sources of power, that we need fresh sources of analysis and political action. Latour, 1984. Some of the rearrangements of race, sex, and class rooted in high-tech facilitated social relations can make socialist feminism more relevant to effective progressive politics. And that is the end of section 3. Next episode is the homework economy and outside the home, or the homework economy outside the home. Let's see just real quick how long that one is. Let's see, it starts on page 20 and ends on page 23. Alright, so I think I'm going to be reading the next 2 chapters on Wednesday. I have no idea how many people are watching because TikTok doesn't tell me anymore, and I've got 3 viewers on Twitch right now. But yeah, I am gonna log off both streams now. Thank you all for coming, and have a great night.